So, Mark, 8 years, that's a long time to be talking with small businesses about their needs and their challenges. Of course, this year, I think, is really different than lots of other years just because we are still watching small businesses, I think, figure out what the road to recovery looks like after the pandemic and decide what it means, I guess, to really come back.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. 8 years is a long time. I thank all the viewers for your support. It clearly shows that we still have a need for this particular type of program in terms of supporting entrepreneurs. And, we think about the evolution of recovery. We thought we were going to recover last year. And here we are in 2022, and we're still trying to figure out what this thing called recovery looks like. And I think as we think about this year's workshop, just a couple of things I want to briefly highlight for you, if I could. One is a study was done recently by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce that really focused on that 3/4 of U.S. small businesses are still struggling financially. They still have some financial challenges, and a lot of their resources are still tied up. They're short on resources because they had to use their resources to keep the business open during the pandemic, and they're coming out of the pandemic, and that is still a challenge. And now we're finding that inflation and hiring are challenges as well. So whenever we think we're focusing on that recovery, things continue to change as well.
So tell me what the framing, I guess, is for this year's seminars, which are going to be virtual again, and they're going to unfold over May and June. What will small businesses be able to learn from all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're going to continue to have a virtual series. We're going to focus on the road to recovery. What does that look like? And specifically, as I just referenced, there's a challenge when it comes to hiring. How do you attract talent? What are your plans? What should you be executing? What should you be focused on? There's still a challenge when it comes to access to capital. What are the grant programs, financial opportunities out there, if you will, that people can still tap into? And also, we're going to be talking to business leaders to focus on what can we expect. We have a futurist, an economist from Fifth Third, who's going to be talking about expectations for the balance of this year and how you navigate those challenges as we think about continuing to evolve and grow as part of this recovery process.
Yeah. Dave, talk about from, I guess, the banking perspective, what you're seeing and hearing from small businesses about what's challenging them now that we're at least a little bit on the other side of the pandemic, and I guess how that maybe looked different than it did before all of this happened.
Stephen, thanks. And Fifth Third is really excited to partner with Mark and his organization for the 8th year now in promoting small business. True passion of myself and the organization that we're committed to the marketplace. Framing things up, I would look at, if we had this discussion December of last year, we'd be having a completely different dialogue than we're about to have with folks, starting in May and June. When you look at the inflationary pressures that we're experiencing, around fuel cost, labor supply chain, logistics, it is a different environment for small business owners. Let alone when you start talking about access to capital and rising rates. So this is going to be, in my opinion, a little more of a science, a little more of an art than a science type of year, because every situation is going to be different. If you're able to absorb labor costs and push them through to the consumer and still be, viable and compete in your industry, that's great. But not all businesses are that way. You think about a lot of the great small businesses around metropolitan Detroit are family run, family staff. You're providing a product and service that you can't price yourself out of business. So those are things that we worry about, we stay focused on. We do think about those stats that 50% of our employment base is small business driven around the country. So their success is incredibly critical. And, I probably have more interest now. I want to say I had COVID figured out and PPP loans and what to do, but as Mark alluded to, that capital's gone and there's not a lot replacing that. So sustainability around small business is critical. We all work together and share the ideas and the knowledge that we have.
Yeah. So talk a little about the lending environment, Dave. That is a key part, I think, of the landscape for small businesses not just in Metro Detroit, but everywhere, and it's a real challenge. Is it more challenging right now or less challenging for the businesses themselves to get access to capital?
I would tell you, depending on where you are in the cycle, Stephen, it's going to determine, what's called the ease of access to capital. Business that they have a history and you can see the cycles of challenges, maybe purely tied to COVID, banks can figure out and underwrite through. Luckily, we still have great tools around the SBA and the partnerships we have there. I do think some organizations, it's going to take additional outside resources. That's why some of the grant money and access to capital beyond just traditional banking needs is going to be necessary. It helps stabilize balance sheets. It helps, give you time to put a forecast together, projections, earn your way back to prosperity. As an organization, we realize today that some businesses were severely impacted and, are not showing the profitability that they had. We had a great trajectory in Q4 saying, okay, we're back on track. Now a little bit of level setting, and this is where the education is so important. Have you adjusted to absorb that labor costs, those fuel costs, the interest rate environment? So once again, that's where that art's going to come into play a little bit, almost by industry, that we work together and say, money's still there. There's still capital and there's tremendous liquidity in the marketplaces. That's the great news. But banks, it is our job to get those dollars deployed to the small business owners to keep things moving.
So Mark, I wonder if, at any given moment, you can see it as a moment of challenge, I suppose, or a moment of opportunity, or maybe it's always a little bit of both. But I wonder if you can talk a little about if somebody right now has an idea to start a business, is this a good time to be doing that? Is this sort of post-COVID or pre-post-COVID dawn a good time to say, I'm going out on my own and going to take my chances?
That's a great question. I would challenge people. You have to be smart, extra smart, and extra prepared as you're starting a business right now. Is it a good time to certainly start a business? You have to assess your strengths, your opportunities, your financials. Do you have that plan? Do you have that strategy? Do you have that board of advisors? It's going to take a great level of planning to certainly think about starting a business. We've always had challenges in this country. This is a resilient country. This is a resilient city. And we always have people starting businesses during challenging times. So I want to answer the question by simply saying, if you're interested in starting a business, do your homework, have the proper planning in place, and ensure that you have resources in place to help you get to the next level, and rely on institutions such as Fifth Third to provide you with resources and support moving forward.
Yeah. What about businesses that had been thinking about expansion before the pandemic? So the pandemic disrupt all of that and now have to reassess. Is this the time to kind of hold steady and keep all your ducks in a row for a boom later, or is that boom here, Mark?
No, the boom is not here yet, Steve. I want to make it crystal clear. Now is the time to still retrench, look at and take a full assessment of your business and see where you are today. Determine where you need to invest your resources today and in the future. And I want you to plan, be very pragmatic, systematic, and strategic as you think about growth. Don't assume that the boom is here. The pandemic has challenged all of us to go back and reassess where we are today. That should be what you use to plan on a go-forward basis.
Yeah. And Dave talked just a little about the lending environment for people who are thinking about starting a business. Is that tougher right now, or people who are thinking about growing their business?
Stephen, I tell you, first off, on starting a business, a lot of great businesses started, in the midst of diversity against them. And, great ideas and great concepts are always welcome to be heard by all, including the banks. And, going to Mark's comments, just where are you in the planning process, and expectations are critical. The banker will ask you a lot of questions today, about customer acquisition, labor, cost of goods sold. So, it's kind of a big boy dialogue, but it's one you have to be, honest where you are in starting something up. But I think we're going to see some great things come out of all this. Someone's got a great idea and it's going to show up. Expansion, I tell you, I think depending where you're at, and it's kind of tying back in the market, if you're looking out, 90, 180 days, and you see that what opportunities on your horizon, you need to start thinking about how do I capture, position myself for that now. Your lead time because of the supply chain, if you have to buy equipment, it's not like you're running down to the corner store and it's there and waiting for you. So you really do have to plan effectively. You think about your access to labor. Do you have are your people ready and trained? So I'm optimistic as we get into the second half of the year. And I think when you get into the seminars, you're going to hear some of that type of commentary from Fifth Third people. But I am one to say I'm a planner, and I like to think long term. This isn't about a 90-day cycle. This is probably the next year that we're going to battle through these things, and we'll come out stronger on the end. And once again, it's going to be led by small business and the ideas that they bring. They're entrepreneurs and innovators.